Hey everyone, so this video is going to be for you if you deal with darkness under the eyes and you're just not sure where to start. That was me for a very long time. So if you're tired of trying so many different concealers, nothing ever works for you, everything looks dry, somehow when you put on a really bright concealer, it actually makes it look worse. If all of these are issues you've had, you're definitely in the right place. I've now kind of perfected my routine in a way that makes my under eyes look brighter, but not caked on with product. I always prioritize the quality and the look of my skin over something that is just going to look good on camera, because 98% of my life is not on camera. This video is truly about hollowness and the way hollowness can often be misrepresented as a lot of darkness, and it actually kind of creates this vicious cycle of us piling on a lot of concealer in order to try and make the area look brighter without really understanding that we're not necessarily trying to cover up a lot. We're trying to play with light. My name's Amanda. I actually talk about this a lot on my channel. I think you're going to find this video very helpful, and if you enjoy it, I would love to have you back, so make sure to subscribe. And let's just jump on in. Okay, so for the first step of this tutorial is really deciding what kind of darkness we're really dealing with here. Are we dealing with pigmentation, or are we dealing with hollowness and more of a deep set under eye? I think that that is such an important question that people aren't asking earlier enough. At least I definitely wasn't. So this is what you need to do to decide. And by the way, you can have both, but if you do have a more deep set under eye, it's really important to know that so that you can kind of make different choices within your routine that are going to help that specific issue. So what you're going to do is take a compact, a mirror, whatever. What you'll probably notice every day, I do notice when I look in the mirror, in general, I have a little bit of darkness there. Especially if I lean down like this, you can really see it. You know, a lot of us tend to lean down like this and we're like, wow, I have this bag, I have this darkness, whatever the case may be. But I think what's really important for us to note is not necessarily what our under eyes look like when we do this in the mirror. You actually want to tilt your head back and kind of let the light naturally shine down on your face and take a look at how the under eye is looking now. What you'll notice with mine, I'll show you, looks pretty dark when I do this, but when I slowly tilt my head back, you can see a lot of that darkness completely goes away. So what I'm actually dealing with is a hollowness, a general hollowness of the bone structure of my face, not necessarily pigmentation. If you have pigmentation, actual dark pigmentation, you're going to notice that that darkness is present when you do this, and it's present when you do this. A lot of us have a little bit of a mix, but mine isn't bad enough that I feel I need to do anything particular with the pigmentation. I will occasionally color correct, and if you guys want to see how I deal with pigmentation necessarily under the eyes, or how I would help someone deal with a little bit more severe pigmentation under the eyes while still looking natural, I'm happy to also do that video. But today, let's focus on the general deep-settedness of the under eyes. I think it's such a kind of light bulb moment for a lot of us when you do that exercise and you realize that you need to be playing with light and not necessarily playing with color. Now, color definitely helps, but reflecting light on the face is really what is going to make the hollow appear smoother. When you're putting on foundation, now I kind of go both ways on this, so just want to like point that out. Using the hydrating skin veil from Hourglass, I'm testing this one out. I've used it once before and I just like really enjoyed it. What you should probably keep in mind when you are applying your foundation is to avoid the under eye area at least a little bit. You know, I'm gonna take it up about this much. In general, if you want to avoid creasing under the eyes, it's nice to go in with a couple of really effective layers rather than a layer of foundation, a layer of corrector, a layer of concealer, a layer of powder. The more layers you have, it tends to get wonky, and it's not even necessarily, I think, because of our skin sometimes. Sometimes it's just the more product that you have on your face, the more likely one product is not going to get along with another. And I think that that's something we should talk about more. You know what I mean? There are some beautiful, beautiful products out there, and we test them with some other products and we're like, crap, this is awful. Well, sometimes it's just that that product happens to not go well with the sunscreen you're wearing or whatever. So what I'm trying to say here is that we're really keeping this simple because I want this to be very effective for you all. I moved you all in just a little bit closer. So here's the deal. I have two main concealer recommendations, and I actually have a new Holy Grail concealer to recommend to you all. Let's first start off though with my tried and true that I've used for years now, literally since its launch, which is the Kosas Revealer Concealer. I'm going to be using one on each side of my face. The reason I have to recommend this one to you all again is that it's a little bit more of a natural finish. It leans a little bit more hydrating than the other concealer I'm going to talk about. I think the Kosas tends to work well for a lot of people, especially though if you deal with dehydration under the eyes. I think it works really well. It does an absolutely exceptional job of both adding coverage, but it can reflect light in the hollows of the under eyes that makes the skin look more fresh and more bright. It has about a medium coverage, which is also great. But what I've personally noticed is that there are other hydrating medium coverage concealers out there that look good, but they aren't necessarily doing anything in the light reflection department. I actually find that if a concealer boasts like light reflecting, a lot of those absolutely do not work for me because brands tend to add these particles, like shimmer particles, different minerals to act as light reflectors. It can tend to make them look scaly. I have more dry under eyes, and I think a lot of us need to be conscious of the thin skin around the eyes. In general, I think it's important that we're taking care of that skin. That's just a sidebar, but anyway, a lot of concealers that say light reflecting, I do think tend to not be. And the other concealer that I have been testing out that I am so excited to share with you all is this one from Tower 28. It's their new serum concealer. What I think is really special about this concealer is that it is able to give me the light reflection, that really smooth look under the eyes that kind of flattens or fills in the hollow without necessarily being a very dewy, light reflecting kind of concealer. And I'm going to show you both concealers under the eyes so you can get a better idea, but just know, I have tried hundreds of concealers, and if you have deep set hollow under eyes, these are the two main products I would recommend. And I will have them linked down below, by the way. If you want to support my channel, using any of those links does help. So just sidebar, thank you so much to everyone that does do that. I'm going to apply both of these in the same way. So the Kosas Revealer Concealer, I love it because it has this flat applicator. And I always like to kind of turn my head. I'm looking in a mirror, and I always like to get right in that hollow, and I let my concealer sit there. What that does is it essentially gives the concealer time to firm up a little bit and dry down essentially. And when you go to move the concealer around, this concealer is beautiful. It will still blend, but the maximum amount of coverage is going to be right there for us, which is great. But in the meantime, I also like to take a bit of concealer and put it over here just for a bit of a lifting effect. The thing is that I do have some darkness, and because this is more of a medium coverage, this one step is pretty much going to take care of everything. I don't necessarily need to do a color corrector and a concealer. Part of that is also finding the right shade for you. For more hollow under eyes, I really highly recommend not necessarily going an entire shade lighter than your under eyes. If you're still doing that, I highly recommend going with your actual shade match or a half a shade lighter. Sometimes something very starkly bright under the eyes can actually create this kind of reverse raccoon eye effect because the under eyes are so bright and everything else looks kind of like our good shade match. It almost draws attention to that area. That's something that I learned after many years. Still letting this sit, and I will go in with the Tower 28. By the way, 1.5C in the Kosas is a really, really good shade match for me. And this is the shade BU from Tower 28. I also think this is a good shade match. Same flat paddle applicator, which I love, and just taking that into the hollow. I also like to take a little bit right there, you can see. And I like to do that just because I do take my concealer a little bit into the lash line. That's kind of just a personal preference thing. And again, you can see that darkness, even when I tilt my head, is still there. So it's something that I like to conceal a little bit. You can see I'm not really adding a lot of concealer. You can always add more. And that is the beautiful thing about a formula like the ones we're trying out. They layer really beautifully. The main difference that I notice with this formula, as I mentioned before, is that this is a bit thinner and something really beautiful happens when it dries down. It creates such a smooth effect. It almost looks like it's been set already in a way that is not drying. I also wore it a lot this weekend and oh my gosh, it lasted beautifully without creasing. So if you're new to my channel, all of that might seem like, oh, it's just a concealer that this woman on the internet likes. But if you're a longtime viewer, you know how rare it is for me to recommend a concealer. So just saying, it comes with high praise from a very, very picky person. And by the way, if you're not a subscriber, you should definitely subscribe. So I think it's time to go ahead and blend out the concealers. Usually wait about a minute, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but about a minute is what I usually go for. You can see here that I have a pretty dirty sponge. I have another sponge on the way in the mail, hopefully coming today. But anyway, I'm running low. But the reason why this is still dirty is that we're going with a dry sponge for under the eyes. If you are using a lot of makeup under the eyes and you need to remove the coverage, but using a dry sponge is really going to retain the coverage of the product. I am always very conscious when I am blending out my concealer. I know it's very easy to just kind of go bop, 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 and like blend it. Each time you press the sponge into the under eye, really take a look at where the coverage is being placed. And if you find that you have really good coverage in that area, you don't need to blend in the concealer again. I think sometimes we overblend with a sponge just because it's so easy to just keep tapping. I'm taking the sponge, I'm blending that out. And notice I'm kind of tilting my head down because that's when I'm really going to get an idea if I'm getting like visually the look that I want, because from here, it usually looks pretty bright. From here, it doesn't always. You can see this area right here, that is looking quite flat and it looks great. Why would I keep blending it? I don't need to. So I'm going to go back a little bit, but I'm just going to press the concealer in. Really, it's gonna just stay where I've already put it, mostly. Especially in that inner corner, there's so much darkness that happens there. I'm just very lightly pressing that. And then what I usually do with this little bit of concealer here is I press that in to retain a really bright middle of the eye. And then I kind of fan it back out onto the rest of my eye. So you can see there, that looks good to me. I don't need to really blend that too much more. And then just taking the excess over the eye just to conceal any veins. And there you go. That is the under eye with the Kosas. And you can see it has a bit of light reflection. And actually something that I'm noticing is the Kosas has so much coverage. I feel like the Hourglass is almost too light coverage to pair with a concealer of this coverage. So I probably will like go back in and spot conceal so that the whole look looks a little bit more seamless. But these are all things that like I want to point out so that you guys can also start to notice them within your routine. Now going over here with the Tower 28, doing the same thing. Something I absolutely love about the Tower 28 is just how like the flattening kind of effect it gives the under eyes without it being a very dewy concealer. Sometimes I don't want something super dewy, but you can see beautiful job of flattening out that hollow, and there's not a stitch of powder there. And again, it lasts really well without a powder. And here's the thing, I'm not anti-powder. Powder will definitely help conceal that hollow, but I also am very conscious that what looks good in a photo to help with hollowness, or a video, for example, doesn't necessarily look amazing in real life. And my videos don't serve the purpose of just exclusively looking good on camera. I don't think that that is really helpful, at least for me. You know what I mean? That's not what I'm trying to do here on my channel. Right now, just using the Tower 28 alone without setting it, I would be super happy. Same thing with the Kosas, it's just a little bit of a different look. So what I'm going to do is just set this side so you can see how I would use a powder. I really enjoy the Kosas cloud set. I think it's beautiful. You can use a fluffy brush or you can also use a sponge. I'm going to use a dry sponge, keeping in mind that I'm just going to add a little bit to the sponge. You don't need a lot. You don't really need to dig the sponge in. Tap it a couple times and you're going to get powder on there. And then I like to set the inner portion of the eye right here. If you just don't want any creasing, this really helps. This is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful powder, by the way, for dry under eyes because it doesn't look too heavy. And then I take the powder right into that hollow. And then I also take it right up against the nose. This is a prime spot to use to your advantage to create a smooth effect. Keep in mind, we're playing with light and also bone structure, so it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. But the hollow ends where I start to lack fat and bone structure. So, it obviously is created there. So why not add powder right here where I still have a decent amount of fat and blend it into that area so it almost creates that kind of effect of fullness. So that's what I do. Right onto the side of the nose and then over. And that is what it looks like. You can see it is a very natural looking under eye. We're not dealing with a ton of product in person that looks natural. And that's very important to me. You can see it's almost a very similar effect to the one from Tower 28, except the Tower 28, I didn't use any powder. Now you can see with the Tower 28 now, I have like a little bit of minor creasing. I think it is so much better to deal with concealer creasing than overusing the powder and your concealer looking dry. In real life, I would much rather my makeup crease a little bit so I can like do this and then it's gone and the quality of my skin look good still, rather than add a ton of powder and then all of a sudden I'm dealing with a textural issue that I can't necessarily correct very quickly. Another way you could set the eyes without using a powder is I'm using this cream shadow from Merit. This is the Solo Shadow in the shade Studio. I take this with a fluffy brush and I won't use this under the eyes. I just take it all over the lids, and this acts as a really beautiful creamy base that sets the concealer wherever you have put it while it's still being a beautiful, beautiful creamy look. I'm actually gonna set both eyes with this just so we're working with the same thing here. If you've watched some of my other videos, another tip that I like to incorporate into this routine is I like to not add any stark dark color on this portion of the eye. I actually don't even use a true sparkly inner corner highlight because I find that it actually exaggerates the deep-settedness of my eyes. So I am going to go ahead and finish the rest of my makeup. And then I have one last tip for you all to make the under eyes look extra natural. So makeup is almost complete. The last little tip I have for you all is if you feel like there's a lot of coverage under the eyes and you can't really see your skin necessarily anymore, or you just feel like it needs to look a little bit more natural, this is a little tip for you all. Take a freckle pen. You can also use, you know, a brown eyeliner, something that kind of matches the color of a freckle for your skin type. And what I like to do, you know, I don't think I necessarily need it today, but I'll show you. What I like to do is I'll just go ahead and add one like right here. And it almost, I can pat it out there, and it kind of creates this illusion of the actual skin not being covered. You don't have to add it where I added it. I wouldn't put it anywhere near the hollow. You could put it right here, which I already kind of have a freckle there, so that's why I'm gonna add it there. Right there. Just tap it out, and it's like, and it kind of just looks like the skin is naturally shining through there. It does, I feel like it does look a little bit strange that I have two on pretty much the same spot on my face now, but you guys, you know, it's all for you all. And you know what, one last tip just so you all know, I always go ahead and take my bronzer or my blush brush and I kind of pat it on under the eyes just so there's a nice gradient. You know, the eyes, the under eyes aren't naturally one solid bright color. So I think adding a little bit of color in that area keeps everything looking a little bit more youthful, a little bit more fresh. That's what I always like to do. As a whole, I hope you thought this video was helpful. If you have other questions, if you have like follow-up videos you'd like to see, please leave all of those comments, questions down below. I'm going to leave all the products I use down below as well for you all. I would love to have you back, so make sure to subscribe before you go, and I will see you all in my next one.